guys, this is Jessica, your Mind Strategist with BU Bloom. And I wanted to share with you some tidbits from the Keynote by Professor Robert Vallerand of Canada at the Western Positive Psychology Conference on Passion. So before I start my day, I was like, you know what, I'm gonna put the cell phone up and I'm gonna give you this tidbit, especially for my peers out there in the corporate world, my entrepreneurs. I want you to really hear a little bit more about passion. I thought it was really fascinating how Professor separated the two and identified whether you have harmonious passion or obsessive passion according to these studies that he performed. And the results really will drive you to want to be more of one, I would think, than the other. Often we think if you have passion, that is enough. But when we break it down to harmonious versus obsessive, then we start to identify the behaviors a little bit more and whether they're good for us and ultimately lead to our overall well-being and joyfulness and happiness in our lives, right? But I want to bring in one other element that wasn't discussed that comes from my modality as I deal in the subconscious conscious as a hypnotherapist and corporate trainer that wasn't discussed at the conference that I want to bring in to you. Okay, so when you're passionate about something, you're passionate about, it's a specific activity, right, that becomes your identity really. And harmonious passion is affords you the ability to have, think of it as harmonious relationship or engagement with other activities, not just that one area. Whereas the obsessive is really just about that one area. In the obsessive, you're really kind of eventually losing your identity to becoming that thing, immersing yourself in that activity so much that it overtakes the original identity of who you were. Whereas in the harmonious, it enhances who you are and all those amazing traits about you. It just amplifies those traits of who you really are and really shines you in a whole nother way. And the key with harmonious passion is that you have balance. If I think of the word of harmonious, also when I think about the body and the work that I do with EFT, is bringing the body into harmonious flow, that your organs, your body is performing harmoniously. When there's a disruption in the harmony, that's where we have stuck emotion, that's where we have blockages, stagnation, and that's where we have emotional attachment to something that hasn't been processed perhaps, and that if left untapped, it becomes attached to your physical body, that becomes a state of dis-ease, which eventually becomes disease. So it's really important that we are aware of this. So in obsessive passion, there is this uncontrollable urge to have to do that thing, even on your time off or when you're engaging in other activities, you cannot even stop thinking about it. And I thought this was fascinating because I had watched a couple of interviews with some really high-powered, hugely rich individuals, I won't say the name, who were talking about relentlessly pursuing what you love. And I've always loved that sentiment. But here was what was going on is the two of them in separate interviews were talking about when they're with family, at family events, or even on vacation, they cannot stop thinking about their work, about what they're passionate about. And I couldn't help but process that yesterday as, wow, that's another area we haven't spoken about, because that on the surface looks like, wow, that person is trying to master themselves, but really in harmonious passion, that's where you're mastering yourself. In obsessive passion, you're obsessing about everything around you, competitors, what other people are doing, how to beat the other person. You might also become not your best traits. Even the studies show violent about it, really trying to force somebody else to see what you see or do what you say, or to get to that ultimate outcome of what you want connected to your area of passion. Whereas harmonious passion is really about focusing on mastering the self. Okay, so if you find that you're passionate about multiple things, hooray for you. I definitely want to applaud you. That means that you have a great balance, and happiness in the process of pursuing your passion comes from not being so connected to the outcome that if I don't do this thing, then I'm not happy. But if you pursue several different things that you're passionate about and you don't get to that one thing, the study showed those people go, oh, it's okay, I didn't get to that, but I enjoy the process of it. I'm getting to this and this, which I also love and enjoy. Those are the people who overall, despite their great successful careers or whatever it is, those are the people that actually have more happiness, greater life satisfaction, and much more self-growth, because they're focusing on mastering the self, right? They're not worried about what everybody is doing out there. So another area that I wanted to talk about, which I thought was fascinating because it touches a little bit on what I do, and I want to term it correctly, so let me look here, is that they were talking about athletes' mental processing, right when they're going to hit that three-point shot, right? Or take that winning shot. And what happens is they have an integrated temporal positivity. So it's integrated, excuse me, listen up here, it's early in the morning. I'm trying to get this information to you. Integrated temporal positivity. So they're anchored in the present moment, right? They resolve something from the past, and they're optimistic about the future. Do you carry these traits, these qualities in the way you perceive and process and believe in your mental space? This is what I work on a lot. So they're in the present, right? Very aware, very super focused on that end goal, but they've resolved something from the past. That means, one of my favorite sayings, failure is data to create something better. So they look at where they failed in business. For them, it's their game, their ball game. And they took that data and applied it, processing, and are optimistic that if I apply this data, I'm going to hit that shot. And that's what we need to work on and focus on when we are optimizing our mind to thrive, optimizing our mental assets, right? And so one of the areas that I'm going to take it back that I wanted to mention that was not discussed, is so important, is that because people were asking the question about, how do we get somebody from obsessive passion to harmonious passion? And there was some discussion on that. And so here's what happened. So the professor mentioned about getting back to your values and what your values are. Here's what happens though, when someone is constantly training their brain to think about that they're obsessed about, excuse me, their reward center is lighting up, right? Good or bad, right? The brain doesn't differentiate between this is not good for me and this is bad for me. If it's something that I've known, that I condition myself to know over and over again because it's comforting and I know it, I'm going to stick with it. So that's where awareness is so important, you guys. But once I had a relationship in the past where the person became so obsessed with their work, they weren't really present in the relationship, and it was affecting their social systems outside and their connections to people and their ability to focus and be present, right? So they ended up not seeing that was a loss, unfortunately. And I think still to this day, really believe that their happiness comes from work. And we find in the studies, as the person gets older, they start to realize what they've lost, and that those meaningful connections, pro-social relationships, are much more rewarding and lead to a greater life satisfaction and happiness as you begin to age. So don't wait for that. Know that now and start switching your obsessive passion to your harmonious passion. So how do we do some of that? So I did talk a little bit about what I would do in my modality. I get the fortune of working in the subconscious mind and making people very aware of what their tendencies are. And it's not about replacing the obsessive passion. Professor did talk about this. It's about adding other activities in. And so what I want to add in is think about what you're curious about, right? So many people say, I do what I'm passionate about. I say, no, ask yourself, what am I so curious about? And go pursue that as a hobby and activity to add into what you're passionate about. Because if you remove, it may not be successful off the top. And then recalling a time when you did have harmonious passion. What did that feel like when you recall a time when you did have harmonious passion and you had balance and harmony with other areas and people and relationships in your life, and you were enhanced, your best assets were enhanced, and you weren't so concerned about everything on the outside or who's doing what and having to beat them, right? Where you felt self-growth, right? So we bring that deeper in a focused state of awareness so that we can apply all of our senses, and then your brain starts to secrete those feel-good hormones, and the body says, I love that. I remember what that was like. I want to get back to that. Before my ego came in, before fear came in, because what we once used to value sometimes gets switched And like I was talking about that relationship, that person values now more career and finances versus relationships. But at the core, this person is such a wonderful, beautiful person who I still to this day adore very much and value as a friend. But at the core has something completely different, but through life circumstances, things shifted for that person. You know what I mean? So we have to undo some of that and add new associations and bring you back to your core. What were your values? And then allow you to imagine and visualize doing what you did when you had harmonious passion. And then asking, what was the void? Because usually people with obsessive passion are people who are filling a void. There's something that they're missing that they want to replace. Professor Vallerand talked about, and that is so true. And so what is that? And what would be a better choice, a healthier choice instead? What does that look like to walk through it? So that's some highlights. I'm probably going to write an article about this because I do believe it's so important. And so today I ask you, what are you exhibiting more? Obsessive passion or harmonious passion? And how can you get back to your harmonious passion? Put that desire in your heart, in your mind space, and I believe that you will make that happen so you can have more balance in your life, enjoy more activities, be present in what matters most to boost your self-growth, your well-being, your life satisfaction, and overall your happiness.